Penn State's coaching search has been a dilemma. Are they out over their skis on trying to get Kalani Sitake?
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
This crossover edition of Locked On the Portal and Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Brian Smith, along with Zach Seyko of Locked On Nittany Lions. Thank you for making both our podcasts a part of your day each and every day right here on the nation's #1 podcasting network, Locked On. We're going to get to a very unusual Big Ten with all the things that have been going on directly with Penn State and where it's going. Coaching search at Michigan State. Didn't even know it was going on, and apparently they changed and did everything at once. That's the opposite of in Happy Valley. Are there going to be any other changes? We'll see what's going on there. We got Terry Smith, Brian Dable, Brian Hartline, and of course, Kalani Sitake with Penn State. And we got to talk about what's left of Penn State's recruiting class because of a certain guy that used to call home to Happy Valley, poaching guys and their class falling apart. It's just a wild Big Ten recruiting and coaching cycle. So, Zach, straight up, is this a situation where Penn State didn't plan this out well, or is it just bad luck? Is it a combination of both? What is your take on the coaching search?
Yeah, I'm surprised that we got to this point. Never did I think that Penn State would be trying to poach the head coach of BYU, because as good of a program leader as Kalani Sitake is, he's not a fit for Penn State. He is Utah through and through. He's BYU through and through. And I feel like this is a desperation move to financially bully BYU into poaching their head coach. And I mean, you might have had, who knows what interviews, what conversations are being had behind closed doors. Okay, if Pat Kraft, the athletic director, is really pushing for this, so he obviously sees something. Because, well, why not Brian Hartline's still out there? He's supposed to interview for Kentucky. Jeff Brom is supposedly the backup plan if they don't get Sitake. And I'm not even under the impression. I know that there's steam. I know that there's momentum here. But as time continues to march on, say Sitake and BYU win in the Big 12 championship game. Okay, so what happens with the college football playoff? Is the guy who graduated from BYU, has been there for how long? A decade now? Going to leave his team Sitake, the reason he's a great coach is because he's a leader of men. He's an honorable man. So he's just going to get up and leave the team in the middle of the season for money. That's what this is. It's because, we can give you more resources. That's what this move is all about. And as much as I like Sitake as an individual head coach, objectively, it's because he really has a nice setup at BYU. It works. I've said that Terry Smith is comparable to Sitake because that is basically BYU's Terry Smith. So you might as well go with Terry Smith if that's what you like about Kalani Sitake from Penn State's point of view.
I wouldn't have any problem with that at this point. Give him a 3-year contract. Tell him he's got to earn it and go from there. But he doesn't have the head coaching experience either, which brings up my next question. Brian Hartline, somebody you and I discussed, but it sounds like he's not an option. Does that also basically eliminate Terry Smith? I mean, I know he's Penn State. He'd be the easiest if you're going to do it because he knows the program. He's a grad and all that. But is he pretty much not really an option because they don't want to go with somebody without head coaching experience?
That's what it seems like, because I feel like, I just did an episode just the other day saying, okay, there are still candidates out there that actually elevate your program. Okay, and then Bob Chesney officially signed with UCLA because he got tired of waiting. He wanted the Penn State job. He got tired of waiting. But that wasn't even my main upside candidate. I said that Brian Hartline and Brian Dable actually give you something that James Franklin didn't, that you didn't have over the past decade plus with James Franklin. The NFL development, the way that Brian Hartline is able to develop NFL talent, the NFL connections that he presently has. I'm not saying that James Franklin never developed talent whatsoever. He did. He got the assistant coaches. But the NFL connections that Brian Hartline has and the proof on the resume of doing it himself actively is way above what James Franklin has done. Okay, so Hartline by proxy is going to bring just a fresh sense to recruiting. the way that he's going to be able to develop offensive talent. You're going to get the wide receivers. You would get the quarterbacks by proxy to throw to those elite wide receivers. And then you already have Jim Knowles. Defense is somewhat taken care of here. I imagine that Hartline would be able to find other key assistants. Well, he's never been a head coach before. He's barely been a play caller, things like that. Bring in the assistants around him. Okay. And it's not going from Utah to Penn State. It's going from Ohio State to Penn State, right? He's been in this general area. He understands what the standard is too. Okay. If Penn State's trying to be like Ohio State, well, there you go. Brian Hartline and Jim Knowles. You now have two key figures hypothetically on the coaching staff, but the understanding is that the athletic director, Pat Kraft, is not interested in hiring somebody, because I haven't even heard a peep about Will Stein. Will Stein was just like, oh, that's a name to throw around. Like, that's for fun. It's just to put on one of those initial lists. But I never heard any sort of intel whatsoever that connects Stein to Penn State, because he's a coordinator. Pat Kraft does not want to hire a coordinator with no head coaching experience to be Penn State's head coach.
That is a very interesting take, and he's not the only one to do it. But now you're down to a very small list, and I'm just going to go ahead and throw out a few opinions here. Mm-hmm. Some of these guys around the country that are coveted, kind of like Sitake, they're after alma mater.
Yes.
To get them, you're going to have to throw more cash than you want to throw. And even then, I don't know if it would work. Like, Braum is the one that gets probably mentioned for every freaking job there is. He's the head coach at Louisville. He played quarterback at Louisville. He graduated from Louisville. Yeah, good luck. The only thing that's dragging him away from there is like a job in the NFL where they have a ready-made quarterback.
Yeah.
Those jobs don't come open. Why would you leave if you've got a quarterback and you're winning? So he could be there 20 years and retire. Like, he's happy at his alma mater. He's rich. He's got everything he wants. So why am I to believe this is going to end well for Penn State? Give me a reason I think this is going to end well.
I suppose it's worked in some other capacity. I don't mean to compare a sport like wrestling in terms of the notoriety, right? Everybody loves football, but Penn State wrestling has done this, which is why it isn't so taboo or crazy, I guess, in the Penn State circles, because Cale Sanderson was his alma mater was Iowa State. That's where he was coaching. And he said, to heck with my alma mater, I'm going to Penn State because I can be set up to succeed better at a different institution because of what they're promising. Go figure. They're actually both Mormon. Sitake and Cale Sanderson are actually both Mormon. So I hope I have that correct. I'm pretty sure I do. But that's the thing, is that's why it's not so far-fetched. It's Penn State still defaults to the fact of, okay, well, we can elevate anybody. We'll give somebody the resources. We'll give them the flexibility, whatever they need to succeed. And I can understand why that's appealing to Sitake when he looks around and says, well, we're 11-1. My salary is what it is. My assistant coaches, their salaries are what they are. But then again, it really just defaults back to money. And that's, Sitake works at BYU so well because he's a BYU guy. It's the same thing that I've said about Terry Smith. I think there's value in finding somebody that appreciates the university for what it is, believes in the university for what it is, and is motivated by more than just dollars and cents. It would go against the entire thesis of why Penn State should try to hire Sitake, that he's an honorable man, again, that he's a leader of men, that he's a football coach. But this move feels purely about money. So again, if you want to go with Kalani Sitake, you kind of already have that right now with Terry Smith. That's why I'm like, there are only a few other candidates that actually elevate you. Bob Chesney is no longer on the board because he got tired of waiting. So Brian Hartline's still out there, but Penn State, oh no, you need head coaching experience. Fine, so be it. But then that eliminates Terry Smith, Brian Hartline, Will Stein. It worked with Dan Lanning, so I don't know why this is so crazy. It worked with Kirby Smart. I'm really not entirely sure. Marcus Freeman, even. I am really not sure what is so far-fetched about the idea of hiring a coordinator that it's not like he's a coordinator at a so-so program. This is Ohio State, which is the standard right now and will be the standard for probably the next 5 to 10 years. Everybody's chasing them. And apparently Penn State's too good for Brian Hartline.
On that note, well said, my friend. On that note, we're going to talk about the former head coach, what he's doing, recruiting, how they battle with that. And while they're doing it, they're still battling to find a coach. There's a lot more to get to on this crossover Locked On Penn State and Locked On the Portal. Today's show is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. The holidays always feel a little easier when you already know the perfect gift, and Omaha Steaks makes it almost too simple. Whether you're treating yourself this season or sending someone something memorable to family, to friends, Omaha Steaks delivers handcrafted perfection right to the door. And this week is the best time to jump in because Cyber Sale is here and the deals are huge. Take an example like this. You can get your steaks, you can get your burgers, just like you always do, but you could get side items, you could get desserts, again, delivered to your door, or you could just get full comfort meals also sent right to your home or for a gift. Save big on the unforgettable gifts with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide and an extra 20% off select items during the Cyber Sale. And for an additional $35 off, use promo code use promo code college at checkout. That's omahasteaks.com, promo code college, terms apply. See site for details. Thank you once again for making Locked On the Portal and Locked On Nittany Lions a part of your day each and every day right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Become an everydayer if you have not already. Let's talk about just get this out of the way. Penn State's recruiting class is, I think 24/7 earlier today had it ranked 125th. Like they have 6 guys committed. It's just to the point like it's kind of comical in a way to look at it, but it's not 3 or 4 years from now.
Yeah.
So this is a challenge, like not a little one. This is going to be a big challenge.
Yeah.
My question to you is, are you surprised that some of these guys are flipping to Vatak or no?
No, not in the slightest. And to be honest, the recruiting class is the least of my concerns because
Oh, wow.
for two reasons. One, I've kind of accepted the fate of all of it. That's really it. It's I've gotten to the point of you just accept it at this point in time.
That's fair.
And then number 2 is the transfer portal. These true freshmen, aside from, to name them by name, Kevin Brown, who's now at West Virginia, and Jasir Rogers, you and I talked about him extensively. You are one of the few recruiting analysts to actually give him the respect and say, this guy's a top 10 wide receiver. Don't disregard him. Those were the only 2 players that were going to play right away at Penn State. Everybody else was a backup or and maybe they would have played more in year 2, year 3, right? But that's the idea, is that, okay, these were players that were going to come in and develop. They weren't immediate impact players. So that's not to dismiss them. The class of 2026 is important, but you also have the transfer portal. So it's not the end of the world. And the understanding is that Pat Kraft, the athletic director, so we default back to him, let this happen, allowed this to happen because he wanted the new coach to start with a blank slate. You use your NIL money to go to the transfer portal or get your former roster players or whatever recruits you want to get, early signing day, the late signing day, whatever. Just have the full budget to work with. No James Franklin holdovers, anything like that. So, and by proxy, James is going to benefit from that at Virginia Tech because these guys aren't beholden to Penn State anymore. I can go recruit them. North Carolina, Bill Belichick has actually benefited from Penn State's class of 2026 quite a bit. And then you see Kevin Brown go to an institution. You see Jasir Rogers go to Oklahoma, right? They've all kind of landed at their respective spots. I notice how all of them didn't follow James Franklin to Virginia Tech. Okay. Because Rogers could have, Kevin Brown could have, a handful of other recruits. It's so far 6 out of the 25, give or take, that Penn State had originally. And I know there might be a couple of more, but it just goes back to my point of you just have to accept it. The transfer portal's there. And I think for Penn State's purposes to succeed or at least limit the damage, there is probably more value in getting a veteran college football player that's a redshirt sophomore or redshirt junior than a true freshman. If you want to win right now, you have to attack the transfer portal. So I would be more concerned if the transfer portal wasn't a thing.
That makes a lot of sense. To that end, I'm curious to see how the next head coach does it, because Penn State has predominantly been a developmental program under Franklin. Yeah. And I think it's the best way to get to the playoff and be consistent. But if you miss basically on an entire class, that's more or less what they're doing now, at some point you're going to have to make up ground, and you can do it incrementally, or you can make the mistake of waiting. They're going to have to take a few more each year to kind of make up for that at some point into that class. That's the process they probably need to take. On that end, Do you think if Penn State hired Terry Smith or any other coach, pick one, it would help the class stay together? Is there anybody they could hire that would make a difference?
Would be Terry Smith, but you don't know what's going to happen. I mean, Terry Smith
Right.
hasn't even. It's because nobody knows what's going to happen. You don't know if you're getting Sitake. I don't care because every time I go to say and put my stamp on it, like, yes, this is happening. I'm hearing all the steam, all the intel, right? There's no way that this doesn't happen. And then it doesn't happen. I guess I don't go as far to declare that, but I'm just like, oh, the things are trending in the right direction. I've just seen this. I've seen this movie play out too many times, Brian, where it's Penn State is trending for this head coach. The market odds say one thing. The message boards say that say the same thing. Everything's aligning for them to get this guy. And then all of a sudden it doesn't happen. And then it's don't ask about it. Don't talk about it. Okay. So even though things are trending in that same direction, I'm not going to, until I see it, I'm not believing it. As much as the intel states that Sitake is going to be the guy, and then who would he keep? I don't know if he would keep Terry Smith. I don't know if he'd keep Deion Barnes or Dan Connor. I'm trying to name Penn State affiliated people. If it's any outside coaching hire, everybody that was James Franklin connected is gone. I would say Jim Knowles is probably gone. Anthony Poindexter is gone. Phil Troutwine is gone. Danny O'Brien, Marcus Hagans. I'm surprised those guys actually haven't been named. Andy Kotelnicki. I'm surprised those guys actually haven't found any new jobs at this point in time. What are they waiting for? Is there an outside chance that Terry Smith is still saying, hey, if this doesn't work out, he would keep the staff for the most part together? I would imagine that Danny O'Brien, Marcus Hagans, and Phil Troutwine would be the first ones to leave. Maybe Andy Kotelnicki sticks around if Terry Smith is the head coach, because again, things were working. The team looked better. It looked functioning, right? They were able to function. Even though people have question marks about Andy Kotelnicki and Jim Knowles, they took such a step forward that I'm like, okay, this group can work. And then you go get some other assistant coaches to fill in the gaps. And I imagine there's a lot of former Penn State people or Penn State affiliated coaches and players that would be willing to line up and be ready to go as assistant coaches in some capacity or analysts with Terry Smith. He's the glue guy if you want to go in that direction. He's not a bad option. He's actually, and I said it weeks ago, because of the way this continues to trend, he may be your best option at the end of the day, objectively. I'm not saying he's the overall in terms of, comparing to Hartline and the ceiling and all that stuff. I'm talking about what's best for Penn State. And with the way it's trending, Terry Smith might be that guy.
With that in mind, we're going to transition into the Big Ten. Where does Penn State fit, regardless of who they hire over the next 2 to 3 years? This is going to be a fascinating discussion on this crossover Locked On Penn State and Locked On the Portal. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be a massive event. But let's be honest, getting tickets is not the easiest thing to do with the World Cup. That's why Gametime is a clutch app, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Gametime, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when seats come open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup a realistic instead of impossible option. With the app, you can go in there and search whichever game or games you want. You can click on them. You can look at the seat views right from your phone. You can know exactly where you would be sitting at any event. It's that simple. I just bought 2 tickets on Gametime, and in 5 minutes, including putting in my credit card information, I was in and out. And the best part for a lot of people, again, the price of the tickets. What you see at the beginning is what you're going to get at the end. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and every match, concert, or event with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Gametime app today. All right, let's talk about Penn State, for lack of a better term, fitting into the Big Ten in this crazy change. You got USC, you got Oregon, you got UCLA, you got Washington all coming in. The coaching changes. I did not see this one coming. I'm curious about your take on Pat Fitzgerald to Michigan State. That is as left field as it gets. This league is wild right now. And you think of the Big Ten, it's the constant slow moving glacier of a conference. But where does Penn State fit into that now? Like, do you think Penn State fans in any way would be okay with shifting expectations for a year or two while we still don't know who it's going to be, gets acclimated? Or is it going to be really difficult for that coach if they don't win right away?
If it's not a fit, right? That's why I think Terry Smith at this point in time just might give you the best of something. The roster appreciates him. And again, I wouldn't put my name next to Terry Smith and say that this guy can be the guy. It's with the understanding that you're going to retain most of the coaching staff. You're going to retain most of the roster, right? You're going to lose some people, but you built some connections around Pennsylvania. Again, Sitake, do we really assume that everybody's going to follow him from BYU, right? It's not like, and that's the thing, those football players aren't at BYU for financial. I won't speak about basketball, but football, I imagine, because they're paying one guy $7 million to play ball right now, to put a basketball through a hoop right now at BYU. I digress from that, but not the football players for the most part aren't there because of NIL and financial reasons. They are there for other purposes, right? Faith. We know what Brigham Young is founded on, what its core values are and everything. So for them to all follow Sitake because I just don't see it. I don't see, you might get some key players here and there, but is everybody going to follow, right? What other connections does Sitake have outside of Utah? Okay. Are you going to be able to get substantial amounts of players? And now Penn State by default, because it's Penn State, because it's within the Big Ten, is still going to be just a strong contender anytime to get big name players, because Penn State is still a big name. It helps that you're in the Big Ten Conference. There are NFL scouts at Beaver Stadium every single weekend. So you want to be at Penn State because you're going to get scouted. You are going to be in front of massive audiences. You're going to get NIL. You're going to be able, and one way or another, I would like to think that Penn State's going to get a solid coaching staff regardless. So this is a situation where, Penn State's going to regress in the Big Ten. I was expecting that, unless it was going to be a Kalen DeBoer. Eventually Lincoln Riley's name got thrown in. I think agents are just playing the game. They know that they can do this, that we can use Penn State's name to get our coaches more resources, more leverage. Look at Eli Drinkwitz. He goes on the record and says, somehow I was the favorite to be Penn State's head coach, and I never interviewed for that job. I was never really in contact about that job, but his camp was. The agents were, and they were driving a narrative, and Missouri matched in a supposed offer. I'm sure that Drinkwitz got an offer, but he didn't know about it. His agents did. And now he's richer, he's wealthier, and has more resources because of it. So the agents are playing this perfectly, and it's impacting Penn State negatively on the side. So whomever Penn State's going to get, it's not going to be a free fall. I don't think they're going to be 2-10 or something like that next season, but 500 is very likely. Okay. But you can still, again, plug and play from the transfer portal. So that's what Curt Cignetti did at Indiana. So I'm not saying, but it is more likely that Penn State falls flat on its face than gets closer to a national title next year. That's easy to say.
Well, on the point of the portal, do you think they would give, let's just use, I have no idea who it's going to be. I don't think you do at this point either. Mm-hmm. Whomever ends up being the head coach for the Nittany Lions, do you think they will support him with a bunch of NIL money, or are they going to pull back the reins?
I guess they have to at this point. Why? The fact that Sitake would be interested is because it seems that he would have more leverage, right? I didn't realize BYU had financial issues when they're paying basketball players $7 million. And they have a 5-star quarterback. So clearly there is an NIL presence there. But I think there are some facility concerns. There are some staffing concerns. And at least, Penn State would be able to compensate Sitake. They would be able to compensate his staff and give them more leverage and more reason to stick around and not have your staff turnover constantly. That's a big part of it. Sometimes, it's great that the head coach is there, but if your staff is constantly turning over, that's just more of an uphill battle. So Penn State will make it worth any coach's while. It's just when you're targeting Marcus Freeman and Kalen DeBoer and Lincoln Riley and whomever else, when they all have the same thing, why would they trade that to go Why would they trade that to go to Penn State? Why would you trade that same stability? I understand if Kalen DeBoer had lost to Auburn on Saturday, this conversation is completely different because it makes a ton of sense. But when you have the money, when you have the resources, when you have something comparable at whatever institution, why would you give up your job security to go to Penn State and start new because you might have $500,000 more on your salary at the end of the day, especially when it's your alma mater, especially when you've been there for multiple years. So that's the difficult spot here, is that all of the coaches that Penn State was targeting, none of them were really looking to get out of their respective institution because they didn't need to. They had no reason to. Mike Elko or any of them they're all great candidates, and I don't blame Penn State for trying, but the stars never aligned for Penn State to get that home run hire because none of the other schools were striking out.
Yeah, it's a different deal because now think about it. Florida's got a coach. LSU, I mean, I don't know what that deal was with Kiffin. That's for
whatever. I don't think it'll work out, actually, to be honest with you.
I'm not so sure it will either. But Ole Miss hired Pete Golding. He was a defensive coordinator. Yep. Auburn gets Alex Golish, a really good offensive mind that's from the Josh Heupel tree. Indiana gets their guy, somebody I thought that might end up at Penn State. Michigan State suddenly hires a coach. Like the entire country.
Yeah.
Except for Penn State, is there another job open that is of any significance? Like all eyes are on them. Do you think that'll put more pressure on them to do something?
Yeah.
Or no?
It seems like that's where we are. And it just makes me wonder, is Pat Kraft trying to find a name and flex the muscle? That's really what it is. It seems like it's flexing the muscles of Penn State. Like, aha, okay, so we can't financially bully Ohio State or Michigan or USC or Alabama, but we can financially bully BYU. We can financially bully Louisville to take your head coach. And I just kind of default back to when does fit matter? Okay, at what point in time does it, not even just cultural, just somebody that wants to be at the university for the sake of being at Penn State? It's been very clear that people just don't want to be at Penn State because it's Penn State. There needs to be a financial incentive. There needs to be some conditions. It's not just, and I guess that's kind of been the biggest reality check of it all, because I thought people would, somebody would want to say, I want to be at Penn State for the sake of being at Penn State. And it's not the case. And I don't think I'm wrong on that at this point, because it's the only thing that I can interpret. I get it. It's comparing to Alabama, to Notre Dame, to USC, to Ohio State, and Penn State's making some interesting decisions by thinking, again, they're better than taking on a Brian. So I guess, no, people do want to be at Penn State. Bob Chesney and Brian Hartline, in theory, want to be at Penn State, but and Terry Smith, but Penn State doesn't want those candidates. No. At some point, this is Penn State's fault. So I shouldn't say that nobody wants the Penn State job. No, there are people that do want the Penn State job, but Penn State is also, and Pat Kraft are getting in their own way, because this could have been a lot easier. You have to roll the dice. I think Penn State is scared to make a mistake on taking a risk on somebody that has a high ceiling, because they also have a low floor. But you don't get to the national title unless you get the candidate with the upside. You have to go with the candidate with upside, but at the same time, they have a low floor. Brian Hartline might have a low floor. He might have no head coaching experience, but he also has the upside that Dan Lanning does, or Kirby Smart, or Marcus Freeman. That's why they took those. That's why Oregon is where it is. Notre Dame is where it is. At Kirby Smart, a little bit, that's his own setup. But those were young offensive, defensive those were young coordinators, assistant coaches, and they elevated their programs after you gave them a couple of years. Brian Hartline, in theory, could do the same thing. Bob Chesney, and honestly, I even think Terry Smith, once you let him settle in, because of his appreciation for Penn State. Again, he's not motivated by dollars and cents. That matters. But Penn State doesn't want to go in that way because they're too afraid that they'll be outside, that they might go 6-6 or 7-5 for a couple of seasons if it gets you to 11-1, 12-0. That's what it seems like. They're afraid of being anything less than 10-2, 9. And I've said that Penn State behaves like a 10-2 program. So it's not totally a James Franklin thing. Penn State itself behaves like a 10-2 program. This is why they're 10-2 every year.
On that note, I appreciate you jumping on here with me, Zach. I appreciate everything we talked about today. You cleared up a lot of stuff. Tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
Same as you, on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts daily, talking about Penn State sports.
Appreciate it. We will see you again soon here on this crossover, Locked On the Portal and Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm sure we'll have another crossover soon once Penn State actually hires a head coach. Everybody have a good one.